Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to Georgia Bulldogs Live. I am your host, Matt Green, here on the Georgia Voice of College Football Network. So this is the second episode of the show since I've joined, and I already feel like I've been thrown into the pressure cooker. You know, we're coming off the loss to Ole Miss in that first week, and now we're ready for a top 10 matchup with the Tennessee Volunteers. So I like to see we got a few people in the live chat already. Tony Montana keeping me honest. You know, it is the live stream was supposed to start at 8 o'clock. You know, I'm running a little behind, so you know I appreciate you for tuning in. Thanks for noticing. Jackson Johnson, what's up, Bulldog Nation? I appreciate you jumping in here on the live chat. I'm not going to include those "Let's Go Tennessee" comments here on the screen, though, Tony. I appreciate your interaction there, though, for sure. Yeah, this is a big week for Georgia, the Georgia Bulldogs, as everyone knows. Like I said, Georgia Bulldogs coming off a loss, first time in what was it, 52 games in a row that the Georgia Bulldogs had lost to a team not named Alabama, and Ole Miss Rebels took the Bulldogs to the woodshed. So hopefully Georgia can bounce back. One interesting thing, so the last time, call it as interesting as you might want to call it for Georgia fans, you might not want to think about it. The last time that a Kirby Smart team lost back-to-back regular season games, you got to go all the way back to 2016. That was year one of the Kirby tenure. And those two games were at Ole Miss and Tennessee at home the very next week. And unfortunately, that is the combo that we got now with the Tennessee Vols coming to town this week. But that's the important detail to me, is the coming to town part, because that's something that the Georgia Bulldogs have not been used to. It is these games have been on the road or in neutral sites all season long, and finally one of these big games is going to be played in Athens, Georgia, between the hedges. Georgia is the only Power 5 team in all of Power 5, only college football team in all of Power 5 that's only played 3 games at home to this point in the season. We're going on the 10th game of the season, and this is just the 4th home game for the Georgia Bulldogs. So that's pretty crazy to imagine. Obviously, you had this schedule has been a gauntlet this year. You had the loss, or you had the losses on the road to Alabama and Ole Miss. You had the other big time road game with Texas. Then probably your 2 next biggest games of the season were Clemson and Florida, which were played in Atlanta and Jacksonville in 2 neutral sided stadiums. So, you know, and then the one game we did get at home, you know, Kirby Smart wasn't too pleased with the fans showing in that one with the 31-13 win over Auburn. But yeah, and then the win over Mississippi State. Other than that, Tennessee Tech is the only other home game. So just two Power 5 matchups in between the hedges so far going into week 10. So I think that's going to be big for Georgia, just to get back at home and just kind of be able to right the ship a little bit, you know, sleep in your own bed, that sort of thing, if that matters. But so I would dug in last week with when we talked about it was just I was kind of dumbfounded by the performance that we saw against Ole Miss in that 28-10 domination, where you basically didn't have anything to root for the final 40 or for the final 57 minutes of that game, 55 minutes of that game. It was pretty dull from a Georgia fan perspective. So I was trying to rack my brain for just how many times a Kirby Smart team has really been dominated like that. And one game I went back to was the 2018 LSU game, that first year of Joe Burrow before they really just went off. And then, like I talked about, that 2016 Ole Miss game, year one of Kirby Smart, and that's not even really the DNA of a Kirby Smart coach team yet in year one. And you look at how they responded to those just dominating losses, right? Just getting, you know, nothing to root for 4 quarters. The Auburn game in 2017 at Jordan-Hare before Georgia beat them in the rematch. You look at how Georgia responded to some of these games, like and let's not get it twisted. In 2016, Tennessee was the higher ranked team coming into Athens, and Georgia, I think, was barely. I want to say they were like number 25, like right. And Tennessee was that Josh Dobbs, Alvin Kamara team. Like they were top 10, I want to say, coming to that matchup that they eventually won on the Hail Mary. But more importantly, that was year one of Kirby Smart, and that team even responded to the crushing loss the week before, just the deflating loss the week before. And then you go to 2017, they blasted Kentucky, or I should just say, in that 2016 Tennessee game before they lost on the Hail Mary, it was the best performance of the season you had seen to that point. So they definitely responded to the win. 2018, after losing to LSU, they came out and blasted Kentucky. Or no, that was 2017 versus Auburn. They came out and blasted Kentucky the next week. And then 2018, after the loss to LSU, you did have the bye week to go into the Georgia-Florida game, and that was one of the bigger Georgia-Florida games of my lifetime, I think, if I remember correctly. Like, that was like number 5 versus number 7, like year one of Dan Mullen, 2018. Like, that was a big-time game. So, and Georgia responded with a blowout win over Florida. So you've seen Kirby Smart teams, like, when they have that bad loss, and luckily Kirby Smart teams haven't had that many crushing losses because they've won a lot of football games, but you've seen them respond. And so that's one thing. I definitely expect them to respond. Andrew Smith, UGA by 30. I'm with you, man. I think Georgia opens up a can on the Tennessee Vols. No, I don't know if it's going to happen. It's hard to. I just want Georgia to score 30. I would feel better about that. I think if Georgia scores 30, I feel real good about a victory. Because that's one thing about this Tennessee offense. Like, there's a lot of talk about Georgia's offense. Like, let's put some eyes on that Tennessee offense as well. We'll get into the game, but there's some interesting stats, I think. As down as people are on Georgia's roster right now, a lot of it's due to the expectations. Let's not necessarily get it twisted of where Georgia fits on the grand scheme of college football. They're still pretty high up there, even if it feels like this is the worst season ever, because we thought we were preseason number 1 and would have a Heisman quarterback coming into the season. It has not been that sort of season so far, but we'll get into that when we get into our game preview. One thing about this game that you can choose to be excited about, or nervous about, or you don't care at all, is the Sanford Stadium blackout. So we saw the 2007 blackout versus Auburn, one of the great moments of in UGA football history. Honestly, it was just so much fun the first time they busted out the black jerseys. This has been such a highly controversial topic in UGA circles. I just feel like the need to just set the record straight. Like, where do I stand on these black jerseys, right? So last week, and I will say the timing wasn't crazy about the timing. It was right after they announced that Georgia-Tennessee would be a night game. I think it was the Barstool UGA or like the Spike Squad. One of them's coming out and is talking about, we want a blackout for that Tennessee night game. And I'm over here thinking, we got a big time matchup on the road with Ole Miss. We can't be looking 2 weeks ahead. Humility is a week away. Kirby Smart taught me that. All right. Humility is always a week away. So I didn't like the fans. The fans were looking ahead. Maybe we didn't bring it for that Ole Miss game. Maybe that explains it. No, I'm just whatever I can say to cope with that domination that the Ole Miss fans, the Ole Miss Rebels gave us last week. But so that's what I'm hearing, right? The fans want to do a blackout. It's a night game. So there's this, like I said, everyone loved it. Everyone loved the black jerseys when we did it in 2007 versus Auburn. And then you did it against Hawaii back in the Sugar Bowl that year. And then the following year, College Game Day comes to town. It's the blackout. I don't need to rehash everything with most of the diehard UGA fans, but maybe there's some young ones that don't remember the 2008 season that well. And we came in pretty cocky, preseason number 1, although I think they were like number 4 by the time that game rolled around, even though they were like 4-0. They had dropped a couple spots in the rankings. But Alabama comes in. You know the story. They just absolutely dominate Georgia in the black jerseys. Comments made. I want to say Kirby Smart said they were going to a funeral. He was an Alabama guy back then. He strayed for a little bit. He's a Georgia guy again now. But Alabama dominated Georgia that day. And Georgia allowed it to become Georgia fans became rattled like no other program in the history of college football has become rattled, as far as I'm concerned. Like I appreciate Jackson Johnson in the live chat. Georgia number 3 going into the into that blackout game. Um, you know, no respect for our 4-0 start or whatever it was. I don't know. I'm channeling my teenage self that was still salty about the lack of respect Mark Richt teams got. But you know what happened? Alabama dominated Georgia. Georgia came back in the second half and made the score look close, but no one remembers that. They remember Alabama being up 31-0 at halftime against Georgia. And the Georgia fan base was just rattled after that. They did have the 2009 game with Florida where they busted out the black helmets and the black pants with the white jerseys. That was a terrible look. So I think after that, fans were like, I don't want to wear these gimmicky jerseys, yada yada yada. Like, I don't know. It somehow it became this gimmick and this storyline of fans being pro black jerseys or anti black jerseys, and it's just the weirdest thing ever. We gave Alabama, honestly, Georgia allowed Alabama the satisfaction of just taking their black jerseys away, like forever. Like what kind of soft just behavior is that? Like I've never understood why that game became what it was. Like Penn State, I've seen conflicting numbers. I've seen a 10-6, I've seen 11-8. That Penn State in the whiteout games. They're either 10-6 or 11-8. I'm not sure who's got the real stats, but that's a bunch of losses. And it's still one of the coolest traditions in all of college football. Like everyone loves the Penn State whiteout game. There's teams all across college football that don't even have black in their uniforms that are rocking black jerseys. Like every big game. I feel like Iowa State, every big game, you wouldn't even know they're a red and gold team if you only tuned in for the big games they have because they're wearing black and white. So every Tennessee doesn't have black in their colors. They rock the black jerseys, look great. Florida rocks the black jerseys. Didn't look quite so good, but there's so many teams out there that rock black jerseys. Georgia's actually a team that has black in their colors, and that black jersey is one of the best looking uniforms in college football. So as far as I'm concerned, wear it. I would wear it as for one night game a year at least. Like maybe even a neutral site where you're the home team and you're wearing your red jerseys. Like you could rock the black. Like, wear it once a year at least. Like it's just a really good looking uniform. Also, Georgia's 5-1 all time in these black jerseys. Like that's the part I don't understand about the inferiority complex. Like they lost that one game to Alabama, and we can retroactively look that was the start of a dynasty. Like Alabama lost one game that season. Oh, I want to actually no, they lost SEC championship and then the Sugar Bowl, right? But started the season 12-0. That team was dominant and they were better than Georgia. That's why they beat them. They didn't beat us because we had these gimmicky black jerseys on. They beat us because they were better, and that's it. Every recruit that commits to Georgia does so with a graphic of like them wearing a black jersey. If they're not in an all white jersey with white helmet, like the recruits are rocking crazy stuff. Kirby Smart's all about the alternate jerseys in the recruiting photos, but not when it comes on the field. So as far as I'm concerned, my official stance, they may be the best uniforms in college football. Just the red helmet, black jerseys, silver breeches. And I'm a big uniform guy. So this is not going to be the first, or this is the first, will not be the last time I comment on uniforms when it comes to college football. But they're one of the best uniforms out there. The fans like it. The players like it. The recruits like it. And if it is a gimmick, who knows? With how things are going right now, maybe you need a gimmick. Maybe you need something to get a little extra juices flowing in Sanford Stadium on Saturday night. You shouldn't. I think Tennessee coming to town should be enough to get up for that game. But Kirby Smart said himself that the fans didn't bring the juice for that Auburn game. And that's the only other real competitive the competitive team that Georgia has faced in Sanford Stadium this year. So it's the other ones were Mississippi State and Tennessee Tech. So if Georgia didn't bring it for Auburn, and I know this isn't a good Auburn team, but that's the Deep South's oldest rivalry. Like I know the fans, there's going to be a different energy for that Tennessee game regardless. But the black uniforms, maybe it is a gimmick. Maybe we need a gimmick right now because Bulldogs are not playing their best football. So hey, black jerseys, I am here for it. So the other aspect of this game, along with the black jerseys, to me, is this is a massive recruiting weekend. And hold on, let me go to the group chat or the live chat before I move on. Jackson Johnson, this guy, he knows what's up, you know. Black jerseys on Georgia were cool, kind of like Michigan wearing blue pants and Ohio State and Oklahoma wearing alternate uniforms once or twice a year. Yeah, it's not that hard. Everyone's doing it. Everyone rocks like one alternate jersey. I don't know what happened to Kirby during the pandemic during 2020. He must have had a screw loose. Georgia rocked the 1980 throwbacks that year. They rocked the black dog collar jerseys twice. Hey, and if I need to make a stance, it's just part 2 of the black jersey conversation. Burn the dog collar jerseys. I don't want to ever see the dog collar jerseys again. No, I'm not here for that. So, yeah, like I said, Georgia 5-1 when they've worn black jerseys. It's that Auburn 2007, Hawaii 2007, year 1 of Kirby Smart. They rocked the black versus the Ragin' Cajuns of the University of Louisiana. And then in 2020, wore them against Mississippi State and against Cincinnati in the Sugar Bowl, or in the Peach Bowl, I should say. So, yeah, they're 5-1 all time. They let one blowout loss to Alabama just totally rattle them, and not a fan of it. So hopefully Georgia bust them out. And I don't even necessarily think it needs to be this week, but hopefully they just start wearing them again because they're one of the best uniforms in college football as far as I'm concerned. And this is a major recruiting weekend. Like I can't necessarily get into all the guys that are going to be on campus for the Georgia Bulldogs this weekend, but it's an insane list, as you can imagine, because this is the only like real big time game that Georgia has had at home all season. So, you know, you're going to have like I know Jared Curtis, the 5-star QB for 2026 that decommitted from Georgia. I know he's going to be there. You know, there's just 4 stars on 4 stars on 4 stars. The class of 2025, 2026, and some 2027 guys are going to be on campus. I know Christian Gass out of Covington, Georgia, the Tennessee commit. He's supposed to be on campus for this game. And, you know, there's some Georgia fans, or there's some Georgia commits that have used some of those visits to go to Texas and Alabama to see Georgia. So he might just want, this might be the closest Tennessee gets to his hometown all season. So might just be looking for a free recruiting trip, or maybe Georgia can flip him. But a bunch of guys committed elsewhere. Donovan Starr, the 4-star defensive back, Auburn commit, is going to be on this one, according to most people, or according to Dogs HQ. But yeah, bunch of recruits in town. So the black jersey, if it adds to the atmosphere at all, like, I mean, it seems like a no-brainer. Like this is it for the Georgia Bulldogs. Like we're not really used to being in this situation. Like I think as Georgia as Georgia fans, it depends on how old you are. If you're used to being in this situation where every game matters. Victoria Friedheim, I appreciate you reaching out in the live chat. Facts. Dog collar jerseys are just plain lame. But thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching live. I appreciate everybody. Like and subscribe if you can. But this is a massive game, and I think this is not a place that many Georgia fans were expecting to find themselves this year. So I know the college football playoff rankings come out. Shoot, that's probably gonna be why while we're recording here. I think that Kansas Michigan State, as soon as that game's done, they'll do a little college football rankings reveal. So this is year 1 of the 12-team playoff. Like we've seen Georgia get in the 14 playoff multiple times, right? Like we expected this team, their preseason number 1, like I said, with the Heisman caliber quarterback. So we thought coming into year 1, and this is the season on the line. And when it comes to the 12-team format, I think it was almost a guaranteed for most Georgia fans that, like, yeah, we don't get in the 14 playoff every year, but 12-team, like, I don't think Georgia's finished outside of the 12 out of the top 12 since year one of the Kirby Smart era. So you got to wonder, like, if Georgia, say Georgia loses this game and they do miss the playoff, like what comes of that? What happens if Georgia misses the college football playoff? Is there coordinator changes? Are there going to be philosophical changes? Like, I think that's something that you have to consider. Like, I mean, everyone, that was the number one story last week when Georgia played Ole Miss, was that beatdown that Georgia gave the Rebels in 2023. That was the origin story of Lane Kiffin and saying, like, okay, we gotta look different between the trenches. Like, and you saw them go out and get Walter Nolan. You saw them go out and get Princely Uman Mielen. I think I've been practicing that name. I had to say it a bunch of times watching Ole Miss play this weekend. Like, they went out and I mean, I think that's what it takes now to get big time guys in the transfer portal. You have to get into bidding wars. And I think Georgia's kind of been in a situation where they don't they even though Georgia's this big time program, like they have the huge recruiting budget everyone talks about, like they're not a fan, at least according to what you hear. That's one of the worst parts about this NIL era is who knows what when it comes to NIL, right? So much money, so much of this money is off the books and whatever, like it's legal, right? But so much of getting big time players in the portal, you gotta throw some money at them. And so Georgia's been one of those programs that doesn't really want to get into bidding wars for recruits and for big time transfers. And maybe that changes. Like, maybe after this what they saw when they did against Ole Miss, like maybe that's Georgia's origin story. Maybe they're like, okay, they went out and got Juice Wells. They went out and got Walter Nolan. Like I said, like maybe we need to go out and spend some money on some big time transfers. Like, maybe that's what it takes. Like, I personally am not a guy that feel like we need to burn it down. It's happening. Georgia missed the playoff. Like, changes need to be we need heads on stakes and all that. Like, I'm not that guy. Like, I'm sure like there's that solid percentage of the Georgia fan base that wants Mike Bobo fired every time a screen pass doesn't work. They're questionably silent. They're suspiciously silent when those screen passes do work. But yeah, the Georgia offense has not been good, so I mean, it's reasonable to be. Also, I just kind of feel like it's been a perfect storm. Like, Georgia lost Brock Bowers, Ladd McConkey, Marcus Rosemy-Jack Saint. Their top three receivers from a year ago. Brought in some transfers. Ra Thomas kicked off the team. Colby Young suspended indefinitely. I mean, essentially kicked off. He's missed multiple games. And then you have Carson Beck playing the way he's playing. Like, I don't put Carson Beck's play on Mike Bobo personally. Like, I can't really explain why Carson Beck is so much worse this year than he was a year ago. I also can't explain why Georgia's offensive line is so underperforming. Like, we've seen the kind of recruits that Georgia gets on this offensive line. Like, all these guys are big time coming out. And I know they've had injuries, but Georgia's usually the type of team that can sustain those injuries because they have so much depth, and you haven't really seen it. And Kirby Smart, I think people thought it was, coach speak, but maybe he was telling you the truth when the season's in the preseason and fall camp, when he was saying we don't have the guys we once have. We don't have the depth that we've always had, and I think that's an issue across college football, guys. This is the portal era we live in. Guys want to play. And if in Nick Saban's era at Alabama, you could sit for 2 or 3 years and then get your time and then become a first round pick. Like, that was a great system if you can get it. Unfortunately for Georgia, things have changed and guys don't just wait around for 2 or 3 years for their time to start. They'll go somewhere else where they can play immediately. So, I think this game, just for all those reasons, I think also, I didn't even include along those other reasons, Georgia's also add all of that into just a perfect storm. Georgia's also playing the number one toughest schedule in all of college football. Like, that can't be understated. Like, yeah, as a Georgia fan, you expect Georgia to be as good as anyone. So you weren't worried that you had the road games to Alabama, to Texas, to Ole Miss. But now you look at it, okay, maybe we should have been a little more worried about having 3 road games to 3 teams that are currently in the top 10 now in week 12. Not 3 preseason top 10 teams. 3 teams that are in the top 10 going into week 12 of the college football season. Like, and you still have to play the Tennessee Volunteers this week. So I think there's just a lot went into this Georgia season, and they've admittedly not been as good as we all thought they were going to be this year. But combine that with the schedule they're playing, and it's easy to see how this could potentially be a 3-loss team. Like, you look at I talk about the SEC right now, like there's a current Big 5 in the SEC. There's a 6, like A&M is that 6th team, and Missouri's at like that 7th team. Like A&M still got a shot to make the playoff, but I feel like it's a Big 5 that's currently in the top 11. You have Texas, Tennessee, Alabama, Ole Miss, and Georgia. Of those 5 teams, so obviously you have 4 games if you were going to play all of them. Texas has played 1 of those other teams. Ole Miss has played 1 of those other teams. Bama's played 2, and Tennessee has played 2. Georgia will have played all 4. And that's just a completely different strength of schedule that Georgia's working with compared to those other teams. And I mean, what has Texas proven to this point? I think if Texas is playing Georgia's schedule, they might have 2 losses, looking at a third. And you could say the same thing about Ole Miss or Alabama or Tennessee. So I think it's interesting. That hasn't happened yet, so we're still sitting at this 2 losses going into the game. But I think there's a lot of pressure on Kirby Smart, but it's nothing that Kirby Smart in this Georgia program isn't used to. Like, we had to deal with the 1980 thing. You couldn't enjoy 10, 11, 12 win seasons because you didn't win the national championship, and rivals could still yell 1980 at you, even though you've been better than them for 2 decades. They still had that 1980 trump card, and it was frustrating as a Georgia fan. So we lived through the Mark Richt era where, everyone wanted him fired depending on the way the wind blew. So, this is what it is. It's big time pressure, big time college football. And if Georgia loses, their season is essentially done. And you go back and look at the Kirby Smart era, and I know the 2020. I'm throwing out 2020 because that was the year. The schedules were a little off, so I don't know exactly the calendar dates of 2020, but you have to go back to year 1 of Kirby Smart in 2016 to where the season was actually over in November. Like, there's years where maybe they weren't a contender, but you were mathematically a contender until losing to Alabama in the SEC championship, losing to LSU in the SEC championship, or years where you've lost the SEC championship and still got in the playoff. Like, a lot of Georgia seasons haven't ended till December or January. So if they lose this Tennessee game, the season is essentially over before the end of November. But Victoria Friedheim, I got a question here in the chat. Given the atmosphere and intensity of this game, what mental or emotional factors are at play this weekend? Was Nico being taken out early last week totally tactical or mind games? So, great question, Victoria. I appreciate you listening live. The Nico thing is an interesting question, and I'm gonna have to get to that. But the atmosphere and intensity of this game, I think that's why we love college football the way we do, is because these are 18 to 23, 24-year-old kids, basically. I know they're grown-ass men, but they're basically kids, and they don't have the same consistency that those NFL players have. Like, that they're almost robots, NFL players, the way they do their job, and just, those are the best athletes in the world. There's a little more variables in college football, and I think the atmosphere absolutely plays a role in this game. I think Tennessee, is Arkansas as good as Tennessee? I don't think so. But playing in front of a bunch of thousands of crazy Arkansas fans yelling like hogs and pigs and doing their thing, Tennessee was a little rattled, and they didn't do much on the road. So I think road environments in college football always play a huge factor in the games. And I expect Saturday night in Athens, I expect Georgia's crowd to play a factor in this game. But in terms of Nico, and I think that's a good place to start our preview of this game. The Nico Iamaleava watch, the injury status is very interesting over the for the this game. So I like most people took Josh Heupel at his word, but he said that the injury to Nico, was just precautionary. He was taken out, but as of like 30 minutes ago, and I think it was a story by Saturday Down South. I just had it pulled up here a second ago. Um, the Bear, Chris Felica, went on a podcast, and he doesn't seem to. So this was on three reporting. He's very concerned about Nico playing in this game. According to people that the Bear, Chris Felica, knows, he said it was a bad concussion. Well, let me see. Bad concussion is what he said, and he's like very doubtful that Nico plays in this game. And I think that's massive if Nico is not able to go for this one. I mean, it's not like Nico has, been the best quarterback in the SEC by any means. Like Tennessee's had their struggles offensively, but if you don't have him, I think that is a huge game changer for the Georgia Bulldogs in this game. Like, I mean, obviously you can talk all you want about Georgia facing backup quarterbacks. We've all been scarred once or twice about that, but maybe scarred for life. But I think that's a huge thing to watch. If Nico's not healthy for this game, I think it's going to be very difficult for the Tennessee Volunteers to win this game. So going into this game, Georgia is a 10-point favorite, and I was just absolutely shocked by that stat. I don't know. Vegas knows a lot more than the rest of us do. There's a reason they keep building those big buildings out there. They are not losing money. But to see Georgia as a 10-point favorite going into this game, I'm not sure how you watch these two teams play all season and think that Georgia's winning this game by 10 points. It's I personally look at this, and we got Andrew Smith chiming in, hit the over. I'm not giving out gambling advice here. He says hit the over. What is the over under right now? Let me pull up that Georgia Tennessee, sitting at 48.5 right now. I don't know. I would have to think you'd take the first half under at least. Like I said, I'm not giving you gambling advice here, but you've seen Tennessee just how many games, the Arkansas, Florida, and Alabama games where they scored 0 points in the first half. The Kentucky game where they scored 7. Like this Tennessee offense a lot has been made about this Georgia offense. This Tennessee offense has not been anything special. I think if Tennessee did not have a quarterback with a 5-star ranking coming out of high school and Nico Iamaleava, I don't think anyone would talk about this Tennessee offense the way they talk about them. I think there's kind of this way that Tennessee has talked about, like they're inevitable. Like, oh, once Nico starts hitting his stride, this offense, once the vertical passing game gets going, oh, it's over. Like this Tennessee, but maybe it doesn't. Maybe he's a first-year starter, and he's still just not that finished product that you're expecting him to be. We saw the Kentucky game. I thought that was the best game he had played to this point, but there's still some drops from the receivers, or else his stats would have looked even better in that one. So I do feel like Nico's coming along, but this is game 10 of the season. Maybe Tennessee just isn't that team. They might just not be the team that's going to stretch you vertically, and they have a dominant defense and a great running game, and that's how they're going to win games. And if you do have a dominant defense and a great running game, then yeah, Nico, he might be just good enough, and he the talent is there, but this guy still has like 8 starts under his belt or 9 starts under his belt in college football. So, or 10, they have 1 last year. So still haven't seen a lot of like as much as made is about Carson Beck, like the 12 interceptions, like he has thrown 17 touchdowns. So like this guy is making plays. Unfortunately, he's making a lot of bad plays too. But Nico Iamaleava is sitting at 11 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. I think if you told most Tennessee fans that before the season started that he's at 11 touchdowns and 4 picks going to 10 games, and then the 10th game, they'd be pretty worried. So The fact that this running game and this defense has been as good as it is, and Dylan Sampson, I've told you people for weeks now. I guess not everyone on this show. I told you for one episode, Dylan Sampson should 100% be in the Heisman conversation. Like Ashton Genty, what he's doing is great. Putting up Barry Sanders numbers, like if he breaks that, like yeah, he's got a case. He should be invited in New York City, but let's not get it twisted. He's doing this against Mountain West competition. Like it's cool and all, but Dylan Sampson's been a workhorse in the SEC for a team that hasn't had much of a passing game. Like he's been that guy leading his top 5 team to this point in the season. So I'm here on the Dylan. I don't want to be too high on the Dylan Sampson bandwagon because he's coming to that train's coming to Athens this week, but to this point in the season, Dylan Sampson has been a workhorse back. We got Andrew Smith here. Question in the live chat. We're going to come out of this game saying, where has that Carson Beck been all season? Oh, man, I hope you're right. I would love to ask that question. That'd be like the number one question we're asking coming out of this game. I at this point, like, it's not that I've lost faith in Carson Beck, but I've kind of just recalibrated my expectations. Like I no longer expect Carson Beck to be that guy that's carrying Georgia's offense. Like I thought last week, I don't put last week against Ole Miss. I don't put that on Carson Beck. Like, yeah, maybe Carson Beck could have done more to keep that defense honest for Ole Miss, but I mean, when your offensive line is getting blown up the way it is, we've talked about the receiver drops, when the receivers are dropping passes the way they are, and your offensive line is just getting demolished, there's not much a quarterback can do in that situation. So, and then the fans want to hate on Mike Bobo for calling screen passes. It's like, that's what you do when you can't block the other team's pass rush. You gotta figure out some way to make explosive plays. So you didn't see Georgia throw the ball downfield much last week because they didn't have time, quite frankly. So if you get in a situation where James Pierce is able to just, for Georgia to get an obvious passing downs and James Pierce is able to pin his ears back and this Tennessee defensive line is able to just rush the passer, that's not a winning formula for Georgia. Like this is the number one run defense in the SEC coming in. This Tennessee team they've been really impressive offensively. They lead the SEC allowing 16.7 points per game versus SEC competition this year. Like this defense is legit. So I think Georgia's played a tougher schedule to this point, especially when you look at some of the quarterback luck that Tennessee's had when it comes to playing guys that have been benched in the game or they've gotten hurt in the game, or in Grayson McCall's example, retired from football a few weeks later. Like those are the kind of quarterbacks Tennessee's faced all season. There was a stretch there of like 4 or 5 straight games where the quarterback that Tennessee was facing was no longer the starting quarterback. So Georgia, I think, will be, next to Alabama, probably the best offense Tennessee has faced this year. Because let's not overreact. Like I tip my cap to Ole Miss a week ago, the way they played. Like I feel like it was more of just a celebration of Ole Miss than an indictment on Georgia personally. Like that was a dominant performance. So Georgia is still the only team in the SEC that has 5 30-point games in conference play this year. Like for all you want to say about this offense, they've actually been a little more consistent than you think. It's so underwhelming for what we expected this team to be. And I think, and also just the identity of what Georgia football is. This team against SEC competition, they're 14th in the SEC in rushing yards per game. Like this is Georgia. These are the Georgia Bulldogs right here we're talking about. Like it's hilarious how fans just wanted Georgia to pass, throw the ball forever, and now they can't run the ball. Like what's going here? Georgia, they've got to be able to get some sort of run game in this game. Like I think that's when they did play Texas. Obviously, the Texas game more than anything comes down to the defense. If that defense that played against the Texas Longhorns takes the field, yeah, Georgia can beat anybody in college football. Like that team that day was just dominant. So I don't even know how to explain, because at this point, the Texas game feels like the outlier. I mean, Clemson, a lot of people forget about the Clemson game too. Like that was a dominant defensive performance against a team that scored a lot of points against a lot of teams this year. So, you can't, it's happened week one. It was like 10 weeks ago at this point. So, people have forgotten about it, but it did still happen. But you've seen a lot of underwhelming performances from Georgia against Texas. Trevor Etienne at 19 for 87 and 3 touchdowns on the ground. Like you got to get, they ran him for 30 carries for 108 yards in that game. Like that's not even a lot, but that was something. That was enough to keep the defense honest. And I think that's really that that's what it's going to take when you're playing Tennessee to not throw any interceptions, because at the end of the day, the 12 interceptions in the last 6 games, that's a real stat. And that's what Carson Beck has done, and that stretch of bad play isn't necessarily over either. It's not like we're figured things out now. No, we're still in that. So this is also the toughest schedule in college football. That I feel like I keep saying that, but it does kind of recalibrate your expectations a little bit. Like this team isn't terrible. They've just played some really good teams and had some underwhelming performances. So I look at this Georgia team. So I look at what Tennessee's been the last couple weeks, and the Mississippi State game, you almost just have to throw Mississippi State out. For one, they're the worst team in the SEC, and also with Nico not playing the second half, there's just not much you can do with that game. But Kentucky, it's like that was a fourth quarter game, and Kentucky played Georgia to a fourth quarter game. The Alabama game, like that was 4 quarters. Like Tennessee has not just been blowing anybody out. So I don't think Georgia fans, maybe if they do get blown out, they should be worried, because Tennessee hasn't blown anyone else out to this point. But I don't think there should be this worry that this isn't 2022 Tennessee. Like this isn't Hendon Hooker, that team's averaging 50 points a game coming into Athens. This team wants to play essentially vintage Georgia football. They want to run the ball, and they want to play elite defense, and they want to get after the quarterback. And Georgia wants to do those things too. Tennessee's just been a lot more successful than them. So I personally, when I'm breaking this game down, I guess I'll give you a score prediction. I think the crowd plays a big role in this game. Personally, I think it's hard to go on the road in the SEC. It's just, at the end of the day, it's really hard to play on the road in this conference. And you've just seen, not that this is everything, but it feels like time after time this college football season, it's like the team that needs it more is the team that comes out and is ready to play. It's not that Georgia didn't need that win at Ole Miss. They definitely did, for this reason, to give a little bit of room for error with this game against Tennessee. But Ole Miss's season was over if they lose that game. And Ole Miss came out ready to play. That was the best Ole Miss team we've seen all season. You look at Georgia, Texas before that. Georgia had to have that game. It was a changing of the guard in the SEC. Texas was being anointed the new kings of the SEC. And Georgia came in there and they were playing with their hair on fire, and they got it done. So I think there's something to, like, Georgia just needs this game more. Not that Tennessee doesn't need it, because I think two-loss Tennessee, and we get in this 6-7 SEC team tiebreaker, like with all the college football playoff other contenders out there. 2-loss Tennessee, there's going to be a 2-loss SEC team that gets left out of the college football playoff, I'm afraid. And Tennessee might be the one that does, just maybe because of the timing of their losses. Like I think if Tennessee is going to lose this game, they are probably going to be notched in there behind Alabama, Ole Miss, and Georgia. So the SEC still could potentially get 5 teams in. We'll see. But I think at the end of the day, I'm now worried about Nico Iamaleava playing. I think that's another storyline that's been added to this game that I was kind of overlooking after Josh Heupel said it was precautionary. I think that's now a storyline for this game, especially. I mean, even if he does play, he's not 100%. Like, I think that's pretty huge, and he hasn't had the most success on the road this year. Like, we were talking about Georgia, this being the first like big game they've had on the road since that Arkansas game that Tennessee lost. That was back on October 5th. Tennessee hasn't played a road game since then. So as bad as that performance was against Arkansas, they haven't really righted that necessarily. They went to overtime with a pretty mediocre to bad Florida team. They beat Alabama, which is by far their best win of the season. Played another close game with Kentucky at home. Honestly, what was the Mississippi State score? Like 23-14 in late third quarter. Like, Mississippi State was hanging around with Tennessee last week. So I think coming into Sanford Stadium, Georgia has to have a night game. This place is going to be rocking. I tend to think Georgia's going to play one of their better games on Saturday. I'm going to take the Dogs to win this game. I think it's going to be something like 24-17. Like, I don't see this being a high scoring game. Like, I could see this game being like someone being in single digits at halftime. Like, we're looking at a 10-3 or a 10-6 at halftime. Like, I think these are like Georgia's given up some points at times. Like, they're giving up, I think, want to say around 22 a game in SEC play this year. They've also played some teams like Ole Miss and Alabama that have some pretty good offenses, but Mississippi State also hung 30 on them. So I tend to just trust this Kirby Smart team that they're going to come out ready to play. I'm not in this camp of like Carson Beck's got the yips or something and he's just never going to be the same. He's been underwhelming. Don't get me wrong. This Georgia offense has to improve, but I think they're going to. I think you've seen Nate Frazier at times in this running game. You've seen Trevor Etienne, and he was hobbled a little bit with the injury. Trevor Etienne's been the best player on this offense. The receivers, you have to get more from the receivers in this game. And Tennessee has been susceptible to some of those big plays in the passing game at times. So I think if Georgia is able to run the ball at all, I think that goes a long way. I'm not necessarily predicting that they will, but if Carson Beck, if he can clean up the interceptions, and last week the one interception was off the deflection, so even that is a huge upgrade from what he was doing. So he was just making some terrible decisions in those games against Texas and Florida and Alabama. So maybe he needs to throw 3 interceptions because Georgia's actually scored more points per game when he's thrown his 3 interceptions versus the other games. So can't make any sense of that. Carson Beck needs to hold on to the ball, but I think the Dogs pull this one out. I'm going to say 24-17, and things get even crazier in the SEC, and we're looking, and the possibility of the super 7-way tie is still on the table. Shout out to Victoria Friedheim chiming in the in the live chat again. Josh Heupel, aka Bobby Hill. I can see the resemblance. I know King of the Hill's getting a reboot too. I don't know if I haven't seen the adult version of Bobby Hill. Maybe they just traced Josh Heupel and made and that's how they got the adult version of Bobby Hill. So let's see. Let's go around the SEC for the rest of our predictions here. I'm pulling up the scores here. This is had it pulled up here a second ago. So who else we got? What other games are we circling? I remember this being a down week, actually. I want to say in the SEC when I saw this schedule preseason. So yeah, we got a few of the cupcakes. We got UL Monroe and Auburn, Murray State and Kentucky, Mercer and Alabama, New Mexico State going to A&M. It's the November cupcakes. As far just as a sidebar here, a green take, if you will. There's hot takes, there's cold takes. When I give them, I call them a green take. So a green take here. The November cupcake is just the worst. Can we just get rid of the November cupcakes? It's it's terrible. Get these out of the way at the start of the year. I hate when teams juice their stats in September with the garbage teams, but man, there's just nothing worse than being like down on the stretch run here and seeing Mercer play in Tuscaloosa. But it is what it is. That's where we are. So Texas plays at Arkansas this weekend. That's gonna be a big game for the Razorbacks. They're a 13.5-point home dog. I don't really trust Texas personally. I've kind of part of it is mainly because of Georgia. Like Georgia just beat the brakes off of that team. They just kind of physically dominated them. And after seeing Georgia get physically dominated by Ole Miss, now I don't know what to expect from Texas. They had maybe the softest schedule in the entire conference. Like I'm not really sure how they got the schedule they did while Oklahoma got the gauntlet they did. But I still don't really know how good Texas is. They have 0 wins over current top 25 teams. Going into Fayetteville, that can be a challenge. I kind of think teams like Arkansas, they don't do it multiple times. They got their one. They beat Tennessee. That's probably all they get. I would take Texas in that one. LSU going at Florida. Florida's just a shell of themselves at this point. LSU minus 4.5 on the road. Did I say LSU? I meant Florida. I may have misspoken. Florida's just a shell of what they were at this point. I think it's funny how they got ahead of the Napier. They knew some bad losses were coming. Like, hey, we're not gonna fire this guy. Everybody just be cool. We're going to year 4. We get it. It's getting bad, but we trust him. We trust him to come back in year 4. And philosophically, I kind of agree that just every coach should get 4 years. It just you get one whole recruiting class essentially to go all the way through. But I don't know. Seeing the University of Florida with 4 straight losing seasons potentially, but 3 straight under Billy Napier. That's just something I never thought I'd see. But yeah, I can't see. LSU has had their flaws. I can't see Florida beating LSU. Then we got the Battle of Columbia, Missouri at South Carolina. South Carolina is a 12-point favorite actually in that one at home. I think most people just don't trust Missouri. South Carolina, best 6-3 team in college football. Maybe even the best SEC East team if those still existed. But, unfortunately for them, they don't get to play Tennessee or Georgia this year and prove it. So, yeah, I think I don't know if the Gamecocks win that by 12, but I think South Carolina gets that one done. But yeah, I think that's how I see the rest of the SEC going. I don't know if the playoff did the rankings come out. I think this might be come out right when we're doing our show. I did not see the actual show. I'm talking to you guys live here. But I have my prediction. So I'm going to put my prediction on the screen here, and I'm going to tell you why. And if you see the real rankings out there, well, those aren't the real rankings. These are the real rankings right here. My rankings, and I will say this, not to throw shots at Josh Pate. Big fan of Josh Pate and Pate State and all that. This is the one area I disagree with Josh Pate is his JP poll and kind of these power rankings the way he does. Is I think it's kind of warped people's view of how we decide who the top teams in college football are. Like Vegas has never decided who the top teams in college football are. And I know Josh Pate has the caveat every time, the disclaimer every time he releases them. That's not how he would rank them. But people see that and they regurgitate it and they're like, oh, why did Alabama not make the play? And even Nick Saban said it back in 2022. Oh, we would be favored on a neutral site. Okay, you lost 2 games, dude. That's not how the sport works. So I'm not doing any kind of betting lines, power rankings. Like this is how college football ranks teams. This is how the college football rankings should be. I have Oregon at number 1, been the most dominant, flawless team in college football to this point. Ohio State, they've had their moments where they've looked whatever, but the win over Penn State, definitely the most impressive resume for any of the one-loss teams, and the one loss being Oregon. At number 3, I have Indiana. I don't know where they came in at these playoff rankings, but if you're 10-0, if you're undefeated in a power conference at this late in the season, you go as high as this, right? Like you need to get your respect in the polls. Indiana should be 3. Same for BYU. BYU might have a more impressive resume in terms of the a couple ranked wins. Kansas State, SMU is definitely a better win than anything Indiana has. But at the end of the day, I just feel like Indiana has been better. And I think I respect the Big Ten a little bit more, even if they've played one of the weaker schedules in the Big Ten. They're still 10-0, and I'm putting Indiana at 3, BYU at 4. At 5, 6, and 7, these are these 3 teams that keep getting clumped together. All 3 one-loss teams: Tennessee, Penn State, and Texas. That's my order right there. I have number 5, Tennessee; number 6, Penn State; number 7, Texas. Tennessee has the win over Alabama. Like, that is something that Penn State and Texas do not have. I do not understand how the AP poll has Texas at 3, Penn State at 4, and Tennessee down at 6. I just do not understand. Are we going off quality losses? Like, yeah, Penn State lost to Ohio State. Texas lost to Georgia. The Georgia loss isn't looking as good as it did a week ago, but Tennessee has the win over Alabama. They've beaten Florida. They've beaten. I mean, Tennessee does not have the strongest resume by any means of the SEC. Like Kentucky, and they lost to Arkansas. So I'm not here necessarily beating the drum for Tennessee. Their resume is not the best, but the win over Alabama is better than anything that Texas and Penn State have done to this point in the season. So that's why I have them coming in at 5. And then obviously if they beat Georgia, they probably you probably move them up over Indiana and BYU at that point. That probably makes their resume even better. Although, given Georgia that 3rd loss, they might look like a worse team in the eyes of the committee. And then when I get to the 2-loss SEC teams, they're all kind of grouped together at 8, 9, 10. At 8, you got at 8, you have Alabama. At 9, Ole Miss. And 10, I have Georgia. Just the head-to-head with Ole Miss over Georgia is a no-brainer. Ole Miss and Alabama didn't play this year, unfortunately or fortunately, however you want to look at it. I think it's a problem potentially that we're running into with these SEC tiebreakers and how they decide, who's going to be in the SEC championship, and do you get punished if you lose in the SEC championship? But I don't know. We got a bunch of questions that will be answered at some point. Let me see if I can pull up these rankings because I thought they just came out, so I can compare these to my rankings. If not, we'll have that be the end of the show. So here we go. So at number 1, you got Oregon. Number 2, Ohio State. 3, Texas. 4, Penn State. 5, Indiana. 6, BYU. 7, Tennessee. 8, Notre Dame. 9, Miami. 10, Alabama. 11, Ole Miss. Georgia at 12, and then Boise State at 13. So with that bracket, Georgia does get left out in this scenario if that's what the playoff is. So that would be interesting. I think we expected that Big 12 champ to get that 4 seed for a while now. Now BYU's looking at that 3 seed right now. Miami in the 4 seed. So, a lot of time between now and Selection Sunday. I don't necessarily agree, as you know, because I just gave you my rankings. I'm not sure how you can have Texas and Penn State at 3 and 4 and have Tennessee all the way down at 7. So the undefeated BYU and Indiana are better than Tennessee, but not better than Texas or Penn State. That just doesn't make any sense to me. So that is all I have. I hope you all enjoy your college football Saturday. We're a few days away from Georgia, Tennessee, kicking things off between the hedges, and it's going to be a big one. Like we've talked about for the last hour. This is last week was a weird situation where Georgia's opponent was under more pressure than they were. That was the game Lane Kiffin and that group had to have. And they got it. And this week, Georgia's that team that has to have it. So Jackson Johnson chiming in, I appreciate it in the live chat that the rankings were released. Georgia is ranked 12th. It is what it is. Unfortunately for Georgia, they're one of those teams that the rankings really don't matter. They can control their own destiny. They beat Tennessee, go 10-2. Obviously, they don't really control it. It comes up to a vote at that point. But Georgia's resume going 10-2 with that schedule it's a lock to make the college football playoff. It's probably one of the top 8, I would think. If they miss the, I guess if they miss the SEC championship, if you make the SEC championship, I don't know. I don't know how you get rewarded or penalized based on the SEC championship game. But I think two-loss Georgia. I don't think two-loss Georgia is getting in the SEC championship. But I don't know. That's for another guy. I know that there's that guy on Reddit that's got the SEC calculator. I should have busted that out. I'll have that ready, and I'll be able to shout him out, give him a plug, because that dude is doing the Lord's work with that SEC tiebreaker calculator. And apparently the SEC officials have been aware of his calculator, and they've confirmed that it's on point. So that is all I have for this edition of Georgia Bulldogs Live. I appreciate everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.